Daniel Cooper sat alone in his small room on the space station called Nexus 7. The room was not much bigger than a closet back on Earth. He had a bed, a desk, and a small window that showed the endless stars outside. He had lived here for almost 2 years now, working as a cultural liaison for Earth's government. His job was simple but important. When human traders had problems with alien species, Daniel helped them understand each other. He learned about different cultures, different ways of thinking, and different customs. Some aliens had 4 arms. Some spoke with colors instead of words. Some did not speak at all but used their minds to share thoughts. Daniel had learned to work with all of them. He was good at his job, but he was not famous. He was not important. He was just a young man from a small town in Ohio who had always dreamed of seeing the stars. Now he lived among them, but most days felt ordinary. That changed on a Tuesday morning when his door chimed. Daniel opened it to find a small floating drone holding a golden envelope. The drone beeped once, dropped the envelope into his hands, and flew away before he could say anything. He looked at the envelope. It was heavy and made of some material he did not recognize. The seal on the back was pressed in deep purple wax, and it showed a symbol he knew very well. 2 moons circling a great star. The royal seal of the Volanti Empire. Daniel's heart began to beat faster. The Volanti were one of the oldest and most powerful alien races in the known galaxy. Their empire covered more than 40 star systems. Their technology was centuries ahead of Earth's, and they almost never talked to humans. He opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a card made of something that looked like crystal but felt like paper. The words were written in flowing Volanti script, but below them was a translation in English. The High King Vareth, Celandris of the Volanti Empire, requests the presence of Daniel Cooper of Earth at the sacred bonding ceremony to be held on the throne world of Valantis Prime. Transportation will be provided. Your attendance is expected. Daniel read the invitation 3 times. Then he read it again. It did not make sense. Why would the Volanti king invite him to anything? Daniel was nobody. He had never even met a Volanti in person. He grabbed the invitation and walked quickly through the station's metal halls until he reached the office of his supervisor. Patricia Shaw was a woman in her 60s with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had spent 30 years working in alien diplomacy, and there was nothing she had not seen. Daniel knocked on her door and entered. Without waiting for an answer, Patricia looked up from her desk. "You look like you've seen a ghost. I got this." Daniel handed her the invitation. She took it and studied it for a long moment. Her face did not change, but Daniel could see her eyes moving back and forth as she read. When she finished, she set it down on her desk and folded her hands. "This is real," she said. "That's what I was afraid of. The seal is authentic. The paper is authentic. This came directly from the Volanti royal court." She looked up at him. "The question is why?" Daniel shook his head. "I have no idea. I've never had any contact with the Volanti. I don't know anyone who has. Maybe it's a mistake?" "The Volanti don't make mistakes," Patricia said. "Not about things like this. Royal invitations are serious matters. They would have checked and double-checked before sending this." She leaned back in her chair. "Someone in that palace wanted you specifically? But why me?" Patricia was quiet for a moment. "I don't know, but I think you should go." Daniel stared at her. "You want me to fly to an alien throne world for a ceremony I don't understand, invited by people I've never met, for reasons nobody can explain?" "Yes, that sounds dangerous. It probably is." Patricia picked up the invitation again and looked at it. "But this is also an opportunity. The Volanti have barely acknowledged humanity's existence for the past 50 years. Now they're inviting a human to a royal ceremony. A sacred ceremony, if this translation is correct. That means something. Daniel sat down in the chair across from her desk. His legs felt weak. What's a bonding ceremony? It's their version of a wedding, Patricia explained. Very old tradition. Very sacred. Only the most trusted allies and family members are allowed to attend. For them to invite an outsider, a human, is almost unheard of. Whose wedding is it? It doesn't say. But if it's happening on the throne world with the king's involvement, it must be someone important. Perhaps a member of the royal family. Daniel rubbed his face with his hands. This was too much. Yesterday, he had been helping a human trader understand why a Kethri merchant was offended by the color of his shirt. Today, he was being invited to an alien royal wedding. What should I do? He asked. Patricia leaned forward. Go, watch, learn, but be careful. Her voice became serious. The Volanti are not like us. Their culture is ancient and complex. Everything they do has meaning. Every word, every gesture, every gift. If you go there, you need to pay attention to everything. Any specific advice? Don't participate in anything you don't fully understand. If someone asks you to do something, anything, make sure you know exactly what it means before you agree. She handed the invitation back to him. And try not to embarrass humanity. Daniel laughed, though there was no humor in it. No pressure then. He returned to his room and sat on his bed, staring at the golden envelope. The stars outside his window continued their slow dance, unchanged by the chaos in his mind. He thought about his mother back on Earth. She lived alone now in the same small house where Daniel had grown up. She sent him letters every week, even though they took months to arrive. She told him about the weather, about the neighbors, about the garden she was growing. Simple things. Normal things. What would she think if she knew her son was about to visit an alien throne world? Daniel picked up his communication device and started to write her a message. Then he stopped. What would he even say? He did not understand what was happening himself. He decided to wait. He would write to her after he returned. After he understood what this was all about, 3 days later, a Volanti ship arrived at Nexus 7. It was beautiful in a way that human ships were not. It looked like something grown rather than built, with smooth curves and surfaces that seemed to glow from within. When Daniel walked aboard, the interior was warm and comfortable. Nothing like the cold metal of human vessels. A Volanti servant greeted him. She was shorter than him, with silver skin that shimmered in the light. Her eyes were deep purple, and her voice was soft and musical. Welcome, honored guest, she said. The journey to Volantis Prime will take 4 days. You will find everything you need in your quarters. If you require anything, you need only ask. Daniel nodded. Thank you. Can you tell me whose wedding I'm attending? The servant's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. The ceremony honors the Princess Ilara, daughter of the High King. She has reached the age of bonding. A princess. Daniel was going to a princess's wedding. I see, he said, though he did not really see it all. And why was I invited? The servant bowed slightly. That is not for me to say. But the king does nothing without purpose. She gestured down the hallway. Your quarters are this way. Daniel followed her through the ship, his mind spinning with questions. He thought about Patricia's warning. Everything has meaning. Every word, every gesture. He had a feeling he was walking into something much bigger than a simple wedding. He just hoped he was ready for whatever it was. The ship dropped out of faster than light travel on the 4th day, and Daniel got his first look at Volantis Prime through the window of his quarters. The planet was beautiful. It had 2 suns, one golden and one slightly red, and they painted the sky in colors Daniel had never seen before. The land below was covered in what looked like forests of crystal, with cities rising between them like dreams made solid. The ship descended slowly, passing through clouds that sparkled with light. Daniel pressed his face to the window like a child, unable to look away. He had seen many alien worlds in pictures and videos, but nothing compared to seeing one with his own eyes. They landed in a courtyard made of black polished stone. It was so smooth that Daniel could see his own reflection in it. Around the courtyard stood tall towers that seemed to be made of glass and light. They stretched up toward the sky so high that Daniel could not see where they ended. When the ship's door opened, warm air rushed in. It smelled like flowers, but not any flowers Daniel knew. Sweet and strange and somehow sad, a group of Volanti servants waited for him at the bottom of the ramp. They wore simple white robes and moved with a grace that made Daniel feel clumsy just watching them. Their silver skin caught the light of the two suns and seemed to glow. "Welcome to Volantis Prime," the lead servant said. She bowed deeply. "We are honored by your presence. Please follow us to your quarters." Daniel followed them across the courtyard and into the palace. The inside was even more impressive than the outside. The walls were carved with images of Volanti history, showing great battles and peaceful times, kings and queens from ages past. The ceiling was so high that Daniel had to tilt his head all the way back to see it. They walked for what felt like a long time, through hallways and upstairs. Finally, they reached a set of large doors made of dark wood. The servant pushed them open and gestured for Daniel to enter. The room was bigger than his entire apartment back on Nexus 7. There was a bed large, enough for 4 people, covered in soft fabrics of deep red and gold. Windows took up an entire wall, showing a view of the crystal forests below. There was a sitting area with comfortable chairs and a table already set with food and drink. "These will be your quarters during your stay," the servant said. "Robes appropriate for the ceremony have been provided. The first feast will begin when the second sun touches the horizon. Someone will come to guide you." Daniel looked around the room, feeling very small. "Thank you. This is very generous." The servant bowed again. "You are a guest of the king. Nothing is too generous." She paused at the door. "If you have questions, you may ask. But know that some questions have answers you may not expect." Before Daniel could ask what she meant, she was gone. He walked around the room slowly, touching the fabrics, looking at the strange decorations on the walls. Everything was beautiful but unfamiliar. He did not know what any of the symbols meant or what stories the carvings told. He found the robes the servant had mentioned. They were made of deep red silk, soft and light in his hands. He had never worn anything so fine. Back home, he owned 3 shirts and 2 pairs of pants. That was enough for him. He ate some of the food on the table. It was strange, but good. Some kind of fruit that tasted like honey and citrus together. Bread that was warm, even though no one had touched it in hours. Water that was clearer and sweeter than any he had tasted before. When the second sun began to touch the horizon, turning the sky into a painting of orange and purple, a knock came at his door. A different servant stood outside, a male this time, tall and thin with silver skin that was darker than the others. "The feast begins soon," he said. "Please follow me." Daniel had put on the red robes. They felt strange on his body, too elegant, too formal. But when he looked in the mirror, he had to admit they looked good. He almost looked like he belonged here. The servant led him through more hallways, each one more decorated than the last. Finally, they reached a massive hall filled with hundreds of Volanti. Long tables stretched from one end to the other, covered in more food than Daniel had ever seen in one place. Candles floated in the air, casting warm light over everything. The servant brought Daniel to a table near the front of the hall. Other off-worlders were already seated there. Daniel recognized a Kethri merchant by his black scales and sharp teeth. 2 Sylvani diplomats sat together, their bodies made of what looked like living plants. A massive Torvakian general took up 3 seats by himself, his 6 eyes watching everything at once. Daniel sat down and tried to look like he knew what he was doing. "Human," the Kethri said, his voice a low hiss. "I did not expect to see one of your kind here." "That makes 2 of us," Daniel replied. The Kethri made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You are honest. I like that. Most species lie even when there is no reason to. I'm too confused to lie right now. Then let me help you." The Kethri leaned closer. "This is a bonding ceremony for the Princess Zilara. She is the king's only child, his only heir. Whoever she bonds with will one day rule this empire." Daniel nodded slowly. "So this is an important wedding." "Very important. Every noble family in the empire has been trying to get their sons chosen for years. This ceremony will decide the future of 40 star systems." The Kethri showed his teeth in what might have been a smile. "And you, little human, are sitting in the middle of it." Before Daniel could respond, a horn sounded across the hall. Everyone fell silent and rose to their feet. Daniel quickly did the same. At the far end of the hall, a set of golden doors opened. Through them walked the royal family. First came the High King Varth. He was old, older than any Velanti Daniel had seen. His silver skin had faded to pale gray, and he walked slowly with the help of a staff. But his eyes were bright and sharp, and they swept across the hall with authority that made Daniel's spine straighten. Next came the queen. She was still beautiful despite her age, her movements graceful and proud. She wore a crown of silver that caught the candlelight and threw it back in rainbow colors. And then came Princess. Daniel forgot to breathe. Zilara was not beautiful by human standards. Her face was too angular, her eyes too large, her skin the same shimmering silver as all Volanthi. But there was something about her that made it impossible to look away. She moved like water, like music, like light itself. Her gown seemed to be made of captured starlight, glowing softly with every step. She was the most alien thing Daniel had ever seen. And somehow, she was also the most captivating. The royal family took their seats on a raised platform at the head of the hall. The king raised his hand, and everyone sat down. "Tonight we celebrate," the king said, his voice carrying across the hall without effort. "Tomorrow the sacred ceremony begins. Tonight we eat, we drink, and we honor those who have come from far places to witness this moment." Food was served. Wine was poured. Music began to play from somewhere Daniel could not see. All around him, conversations started in a dozen different languages, but Daniel could not focus on any of it. He kept looking at the princess, and once, when his eyes found her, she was already looking at him. Their gazes met across the crowded hall. Zilara smiled, just slightly, a small curl of her lips that seemed meant only for him. Then she looked away, and Daniel was left wondering what had just happened. "Be careful, human," the Kethri whispered beside him. "The princess is not for creatures like us to admire." But Daniel could not stop thinking about that smile, about the way her eyes had found his in a room of hundreds. Something was happening here, something he did not understand. He remembered Patricia's words. Everything they do has meaning. What did that smile mean? Daniel ate and drank and pretended to listen to the conversations around him. But his mind was elsewhere, trying to solve a puzzle he did not even know the shape of yet. When the feast ended and he was led back to his quarters, he lay on the enormous bed and stared at the ceiling. Sleep did not come easily. His thoughts kept returning to the princess, to the invitation, to the question that would not leave him alone. Why was he really here? Daniel woke before dawn. Sleep had come in pieces through the night, broken by strange dreams he could not remember. He lay in bed and watched through the window as the first sun slowly rose above the crystal forests. A servant brought him breakfast and fresh robes, these ones even more elegant than before, pure white with gold thread woven through the fabric. Daniel put them on and waited. When the second sun appeared on the horizon, another knock came at his door. The same tall servant from the night before stood waiting. "The ceremony begins," he said. "All guests must be present at the sacred amphitheater." Daniel followed him through the palace and out into the morning light. They walked along paths of white stone that wound through gardens filled with plants Daniel had never seen. Flowers that chimed like bells when the wind touched them. Trees with leaves that changed color as you watched. The amphitheater was enormous. It was carved into the side of a hill, with rows of seats curving down toward a central stage. Thousands of Volanthi were already gathered, their silver bodies filling the seats like a living sea of metal. The morning light made them shine so bright that Daniel had to squint. He was led to a section near the front, where the other off-world guests waited. The Kethri nodded at him as he sat down. The Sylvani diplomats whispered to each other in their rustling language. The Torvakian general sat as still as a statue. On the stage below, priests in flowing white robes moved around a stone altar. They carried bowls of smoking incense and made gestures in the air that seemed to leave trails of light behind. The smell drifted up to Daniel, sweet and sharp at the same time, making his head feel light. Then the chanting began. It was unlike any music Daniel had ever heard. The voices of the priests rose and fell in patterns that did not follow any rules he understood. The sound seemed to vibrate in his bones, in his chest, in his very thoughts. He felt like he was dreaming while awake. Through the haze of sound and smoke, he saw her. Princess Alara walked onto the stage alone. She wore a simple white gown now, no jewelry, no crown. Her silver skin was bare and beautiful. She moved to the center of the stage and knelt before the altar, closing her eyes. The chanting continued around her. The priests circled her slowly, their voices weaving together into something that felt like magic. Even though Daniel did not believe in magic, he leaned toward the Sylvani diplomat beside him. "What happens now?" he whispered. The Sylvani turned to look at him with eyes like deep green pools. "The princess must choose her mate." "Choose? I thought this was a wedding. Doesn't she already have a groom?" The Sylvani made a sound that might have been confusion. "There is no groom yet. The bonding ceremony is where the choice is made. The female selects from among those present." Daniel felt ice form in his stomach. "From those present? You mean from the audience?" "From any male who has been invited by the crown. It is the ancient way of the Volanthi. The female chooses, and the male must prove himself worthy." The Sylvani studied Daniel with sudden interest. "You were invited by the High King himself, were you not?" Daniel did not answer. He was too busy trying to understand what he had just heard. This was not a wedding ceremony. This was a choosing ceremony. And somehow, impossibly, he might be one of the options. A great horn sounded across the amphitheater. The chanting stopped. The silence that followed was so complete that Daniel could hear his own heart beating. Princess Alara opened her eyes and rose to her feet. When she spoke, her voice carried across the vast space without effort, reaching every ear as if she stood right beside them. "I call forth those who seek the bond," she said. "Let all who wish to be considered step forward and present themselves." Movement rippled through the crowd. From different sections of the amphitheater, Volanthi males began to rise. They were all tall and proud, dressed in fine robes of different colors. One by one, they made their way down to the stage. Daniel counted 12 of them. They formed a line before the altar, each one bowing deeply to the princess before stating their name and their family line. Their voices were strong and confident. They listed accomplishments and honors, battles won, and agreements made. They spoke of their bloodlines stretching back thousands of years. The princess listened to each one with the same calm expression. She did not smile or frown. She simply watched and listened as if seeing into their very souls. When the last candidate finished speaking, silence fell again. The princess remained still for a long moment. The crowd held its breath. Then, slowly, her gaze lifted from the line of nobles. It swept across the amphitheater, past rows and rows of silver faces, until it found the section where the off-world guests sat. Until it found Daniel. "There is another," she said. The crowd erupted in whispers. Thousands of voices speaking at once in confusion and surprise. The princess raised her hand, and silence returned. "One who stands apart from the rest. One who was brought here by my father's own command." Her eyes locked with Daniel's, and he felt like the ground had disappeared beneath him. "Human, step forward." Daniel did not move. He could not move. This had to be a mistake. This had to be some kind of misunderstanding. But the princess waited. The crowd watched. And slowly, Daniel's legs began to move on their own. He walked down the steps toward the stage. Each step felt like walking through water. The eyes of thousands of Volanthi followed him. He could feel their shock, their anger, their disbelief. A human walking toward their princess. A human standing among their noble sons. When he reached the stage, the 12 candidates turned to look at him. Their expressions ranged from confusion to outrage. One of them, a tall warrior with scars crossing his jaw, stepped forward with fury in his eyes. "This is madness," the warrior declared. "A human cannot participate in the sacred bond. He is not of our blood. He is not of our world. He is nothing but a creature from a young and weak species." The words hit Daniel like blows. But before he could respond, another voice cut through the tension. "Enough." The High King rose from his seat. Despite his age, despite his frailty, his presence filled the entire amphitheater. The scarred warrior fell silent immediately and stepped back. "The human was invited by my hand," the king said. "He was brought here by my command. He stands in this place by right and by law. Any who challenge this challenge me directly." His ancient eyes swept across the gathered nobles. "Is there any who would challenge me?" No one spoke. No one moved. The king nodded slowly. "The human will be considered. The ceremony will continue as tradition demands." Daniel stood among the 12 Volanthi candidates, feeling smaller than he had ever felt in his life. He was shorter than all of them. He was weaker than all of them. His skin was pale and ordinary compared to their shining silver. He did not belong here, but he was here anyway. The princess approached him. Up close, she was even more striking. Her violet eyes seemed to hold depths he could not begin to understand. "Human," she said softly, so only he could hear. "Do you know why you are here?" Daniel shook his head. "I don't understand any of this." She smiled that small, secret smile again. "Then perhaps you will learn. The trials will reveal what you truly are." "Trials?" But she was already turning away, moving back to the altar. The High King raised his hand, and the ceremony continued. Daniel stood in line with the other candidates, his mind racing. He thought of Patricia's warning. Don't participate in anything you don't fully understand. It was too late for that now. Whatever happened next, there was no going back. He was part of this ceremony now, part of a tradition older than human civilization itself. And he would have to face whatever trials awaited. He just hoped he would survive them. The High King descended from his throne and walked slowly toward the altar. In his ancient hands, he carried a staff of silver and crystal that caught the light and scattered it into rainbows. "The bond is sacred," he said, his voice filling the amphitheater. "It cannot be given to one who is unworthy. Since the first days of our empire, those who seek to join with royalty must first prove themselves through the trial of 3 virtues." He gestured to the altar, where 3 objects rested on cushions of dark velvet. A sword with a blade that shimmered like water, a scroll covered in ancient writing, and a small crystal sphere that glowed with soft inner light. "Strength," the king said, pointing to the sword. Wisdom, he pointed to the scroll. And compassion, he pointed to the sphere. These are the pillars upon which the Volanti Empire was built. Each candidate must demonstrate mastery of at least one virtue to remain in consideration. Daniel stared at the three objects. His stomach twisted with fear. He was not strong, not by any measure. His wisdom was limited to understanding cultural differences between trading species. And compassion? He did not even know how that could be tested. The first trial began. The trial of strength. One by one, each candidate stepped forward and took the silver sword from the altar. The moment they touched it, the air around them shimmered, and a holographic warrior appeared before them. The warrior was made of light, but it moved and fought like something real. The candidates fought well. They had trained their whole lives for moments like this. Their movements were smooth and deadly, their sword work elegant and precise. The holographic opponent grew stronger with each passing moment, attacking faster and harder, until eventually the candidate fell or surrendered. The Volanti nobles lasted for minutes at a time. Some defeated 3 or 4 forms of the holographic warrior before finally being overwhelmed. The crowd cheered for each display of skill and strength. Then it was Daniel's turn. He walked to the altar and lifted the sword. It was lighter than he expected, but still awkward in his hands. He had never trained with a sword. He had never trained to fight at all. The holographic warrior appeared before him. It was humanoid in shape, but made of pure golden light. Its eyes were empty spaces that somehow still seemed to watch him dotted attacked. Daniel tried to block. The sword moved too slowly. The warrior's blade struck his shoulder, and even though it was made of light, it hit with enough force to spin him around. He stumbled, tried to raise his sword again, but the warrior was already striking at his legs. He fell. The trial had lasted less than 10 seconds. Shame burned in Daniel's chest as he returned to the line of candidates. Some of the Volanti nobles smirked at him. The scarred warrior openly laughed. In the crowd, he could hear whispers of mockery. The human could not even last a moment. Why is he here? Daniel kept his eyes forward and his face still. He would not give them the satisfaction of seeing how much this hurt. The second trial began. The trial of wisdom. Each candidate was brought before the scroll and given a series of questions. Some were riddles. Some were philosophical problems. Some asked about Volanti history and law. The answers required deep knowledge of the empire, its traditions, and its beliefs. The Volanti nobles answered well. They had studied these things since childhood. They quoted ancient texts and referenced historical events that Daniel had never heard of. When Daniel's turn came, he stood before the scroll and listened to the questions. Some he could answer, using what he had learned in his years as a cultural liaison. He understood a few of the philosophical concepts. He could solve some of the simpler riddles, but the deeper questions about Volanti history and tradition were beyond him. He did not know which king had written the fifth accord. He could not name the 3 heroes of the Crystal War. He had never heard of the principle of ascending light. When the trial ended, he had answered perhaps half the questions correctly. Better than his performance with the sword, but not enough to impress anyone. Again, whispers spread through the crowd. Again, the noble candidates looked at him with contempt. Then came the third trial. The trial of compassion. Each candidate was brought before the crystal sphere. They were instructed to hold it in their hands, close their eyes, and speak from their heart about what they would sacrifice for those they loved. The sphere would glow bright if the words were true and grow dim if they were false. The first noble stepped forward. He held the sphere and spoke of his duty to the empire, his honor as a warrior, and his willingness to die in battle for the glory of his family name. The sphere glowed with steady, modest light. The next spoke of his obligations to his ancestors, his commitment to continuing his bloodline, and his promise to bring honor to his house. Again, the sphere glowed moderately. One by one, the candidates spoke. They talked of duty and honor, of legacy and tradition. Their words were polished and proper, clearly rehearsed. The sphere glowed for each of them, but never brightly. Then it was Daniel's turn. He walked to the altar and picked up the sphere. It was warm in his hands, almost alive. He closed his eyes and tried to clear his mind. What would he sacrifice for those he loved? He thought of his mother. He thought of the small house in Ohio where he had grown up. He thought of her working double shifts at the factory so he could afford to go to the academy. He thought of the way she smiled when he told her he had been accepted into the space program. He thought of the letters she still sent him every week, filled with small news about neighbors and weather, and the garden she was growing. When he spoke, he did not speak of duty or honor. He spoke of love. "My mother raised me alone," he said. "My father died when I was young, and she had to do everything by herself. She worked jobs she hated, so I could have opportunities she never had. She went hungry some nights so I could eat. She never complained. She never asked for anything in return." The sphere in his hands began to glow brighter. "I am standing here today because of her. Everything I am, everything I might become, exists because she sacrificed so much for me. If I could give her back even a fraction of what she gave me, I would do anything. I would cross galaxies. I would fight impossible battles. I would face trials I have no chance of winning." The sphere glowed brighter still, so bright that Daniel had to squint even with his eyes closed. "Where I come from, we are not strong like other species. We are not wise like the ancient races. We do not live for centuries or rule great empires. We are small and weak and our lives are short. But we love. We love with everything we have, with every piece of ourselves, even when it breaks us. Because love is all we have. It is the only thing that makes us matter." The sphere blazed like a captured star. Daniel opened his eyes. The light from the sphere was so bright that it cast shadows across the entire stage. The crowd had fallen completely silent. Even the noble candidates were staring at him with something other than contempt in their eyes. The High King rose slowly from his throne. His ancient face showed an expression Daniel could not read. "In all my years," the king said quietly, "I have never seen the sphere burn so bright." Daniel looked down at his hands. The sphere's light was fading now, returning to its normal soft glow. But something had changed. He could feel it in the air, in the way people were looking at him. The scarred warrior stepped forward, his face twisted with anger. "A trick," he said. "Some kind of human deception. The sphere must be broken." "The sphere cannot be broken," the king replied. "It reads the truth in the heart, and the truth cannot be faked." He looked at Daniel with those sharp, ancient eyes. "The human has passed the trial of compassion. He remains in consideration for the bond." The crowd erupted into noise. Some voices were angry. Some were confused. Some, Daniel thought, might even be impressed. He returned to his place in the line of candidates. His heart was still pounding, but something had changed inside him too. He had come here expecting to fail. He had expected to be humiliated and sent home. Instead, he had shown them something they had never seen before. A human heart, laid bare, burning with love. Perhaps that was worth something after all. The trials were complete. 13 candidates remained standing before the altar. 11 Volanthi nobles who had demonstrated strength and wisdom in ways that honored their ancient traditions. And 1 human who had made a crystal sphere burn like a star. Princess Zilara rose from her place of meditation. She moved slowly along the line of candidates, studying each one in turn. Her violet eyes seemed to look through them rather than at them, seeing something beyond what was visible. Daniel watched her approach. His heart beat so hard, he thought it might break his chest. Every step she took brought her closer to a decision that would change everything, not just for her or for him, but perhaps for both their species. She paused before the scarred warrior. He was the strongest of the candidates, the most skilled in combat. His family line stretched back to the founding of the empire. By any reasonable measure, he should have been the obvious choice. The princess looked at him for a long moment. Then she moved on. She paused before another noble, younger than the warrior, but from an equally powerful family. He had answered more wisdom questions correctly than anyone else. His knowledge of Volanthi tradition was flawless. Again, she looked at him for a long moment. Again, she moved on. One by one, she passed each candidate. With each step, the tension in the amphitheater grew. The crowd was silent now, watching with held breath. Then she reached Daniel Dodd. She stopped directly in front of him, closer than she had stood to any of the others. Her silver face was unreadable, but her eyes held something that looked almost like curiosity. "You are strange, human," she said softly. "Your body is weak. In combat, you fell before you could even raise your sword. Your mind is quick but lacks the depth of Volanthi learning. You could not answer questions that our children learn in their first years of study." Daniel said nothing. There was nothing he could say. Everything she said was true. "And yet," she continued, "when you spoke of love, your heart burned brighter than any I have ever seen. Brighter than warriors who have fought 100 battles. Brighter than scholars who have studied for 1,000 years." She tilted her head slightly. "Why?" Daniel met her gaze, though every instinct told him to look away. Something in her question deserved honesty, and honesty was all he had left to give. "Because where I come from, love is everything," he said. "Humans are not the strongest or the wisest. We do not live for centuries or command great armies. Our time is short, and our bodies are fragile. So we love with everything we have. We love completely, without holding anything back, because we know it might all end tomorrow." He took a breath. "The Volanthi have had thousands of years to build your empire. You have time to be patient, to be careful, to measure your choices. Humans do not have that luxury. We have only this moment, this day, this brief life. And so we pour all of ourselves into the things that matter, into the people that matter." The princess was silent for a long moment. The crowd was silent. Even the wind seemed to have stopped blowing. "My father has been watching your species for many years," she said finally. "He believes that humans are destined for greatness, not because of your strength or your wisdom, but because of your hearts. He believes that your capacity for love and sacrifice will one day make you the greatest of all the starfaring races." She reached out and took Daniel's hand. Her skin was cool and smooth against his, but her grip was strong. "He sent you that invitation to test his belief. And you, Daniel Cooper of Earth, have proven him right." She turned to face her father, their joined hands raised for all to see. "I have made my choice," she declared. "I choose the human. I choose Daniel Cooper." For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then the amphitheater exploded. Voices shouted in anger and disbelief. The scarred warrior drew his blade and lunged toward Daniel, only to be caught by the royal guards before he could take 2 steps. Noble families called out in protest, demanding that the choice be reversed. Chaos spread through the crowd like fire, but through it all, the High King remained calm. He raised his staff, and a pulse of light spread out from it, washing over the amphitheater. Silence fell instantly. "The princess has chosen," he said, his voice brooking no argument. "The bond will be made. This is the law of our people since the first days. The female chooses, and her choice is final. Any who stand against this stand against the crown itself." He looked out at the gathered nobles, at the angry faces and clenched fists. "I know this choice is unexpected. I know many of you are confused and angry, but the Empire must grow and change if it is to survive. The universe is larger than Volanthi space. There are species out there we do not yet understand, powers we have not yet faced. If we remain closed within ourselves, we will eventually fade away like so many empires before us. He turned to look at Daniel. Humans are young and weak, yes, but they are also bold and passionate and full of fire. They burn bright in ways we have forgotten how to burn. Perhaps that is what we need. Perhaps that is what my daughter needs. The ceremony continued. The protests faded to grumbling acceptance as the weight of tradition settled over the crowd. The choice had been made. The law was clear. There was nothing anyone could do. Daniel stood before the altar beside Princess Silara, as the priests wrapped a silver cord around their joined wrists. They spoke vows in the ancient Volanthi tongue, words that Daniel barely understood but repeated as best he could. The priests chanted blessings. Incense filled the air. Light from the twin suns fell upon them like a benediction. When it was done, when the final words were spoken and the cord was tied, Daniel looked at his new wife and felt a strange mix of terror and wonder. "You did not know," Zilara said softly, so only he could hear. "When you accepted my father's invitation, you thought you were coming to watch a wedding." "I had no idea," Daniel admitted. "I thought there was some mistake. I kept waiting for someone to tell me I wasn't supposed to be here." Zilara smiled. "There was no mistake. My father chose you very carefully. He's been watching human progress for decades, studying your species, looking for signs of the greatness he believes you will achieve. When he saw your record as a cultural liaison, your ability to bridge gaps between species, he knew you might be the one." "The one for what?" "The one to show my people that there is more to strength than muscle, more to wisdom than knowledge, more to worth than blood and lineage." She squeezed his hand. "The bond between Volanthi and humans will be stronger because of this day. Not just between our governments, but between our peoples. You have shown them what human hearts are capable of." Daniel looked out at the crowd of silver faces watching them. Some were still angry. Some were merely curious. But here and there, he saw expressions that might have been respect. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," he said honestly. "I don't know your traditions or your laws. I don't know how to be a prince of an alien empire. I was just a junior diplomat on a space station." "You were never just anything," Zilara replied. "And you will not face this alone. I will teach you what you need to know. My father's advisors will guide you. And in time, you will find your place." She turned to face the crowd and raised their joined hands high. "Let all know that the bond is sealed," she declared. "Let all know that Daniel Cooper of Earth is now a prince of the Volanthi Empire. Let all know that the future is beginning." The crowd did not cheer. They were too shocked, too uncertain. But they did bow. Thousands of silver heads lowering in recognition of the new reality. Daniel thought of his mother, back on Earth. She would receive news of this in a few months. He imagined her face when she learned that her son, the boy from Ohio who had always dreamed of the stars, was now royalty in an alien empire. She would probably faint. He thought of Patricia Shaw, who had warned him not to participate in anything he did not fully understand. He had broken that rule completely, but somehow he could not bring himself to regret it. The path ahead would be difficult. He would face challenges he could not yet imagine. There would be enemies who wanted him gone, and traditions he would struggle to learn. He was a human in an alien world, a soft creature among beings who valued strength above all else. But he was also something new, a bridge between species, a symbol of what was possible when walls came down and hearts opened up. He squeezed Zilara's hand, and she squeezed back. Whatever came next, he would face it the way humans had always faced the impossible. With love, with compassion, with the stubborn refusal to give up Dot. And perhaps, in the end, that would be more than enough Dot. It would be everything.